Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for a community briefing. I'm Jennifer Bender, Public Information Officer with the Watertown Area Task Force. Up first, we have Mayor Sarah Karen with a community update.
Good afternoon. Today is April 28th, 2020. We now have 2,313 cases in our state of COVID-19. We still are at 11 deaths. Cottington County remains at 14 cases with 13 recovered. The City Council met last night and voted to let the emergency ordinance expire and fall back upon the Governor's executive order. Council President Glenn Vilhauer is here today to talk about that a little bit more, but I would like to talk to you about what the rules are now. So the executive order has just changed. Governor Noem issued executive order number 2020-20 today, and that order says that every South Dakotan shall implement and follow South Dakota's back to normal plan. All people must exercise personal responsibility. And you can see the executive order and the plan online, but I'll run down basically what they say. For employers, they are now to encourage good hygiene and sanitation practices, especially in high traffic areas, encourage employees to stay home when sick, and if previously operating via telework, begin transitioning employees back to the workplace, and where appropriate, screen employees for symptoms prior to entering the workplace. And specifically, enclosed retail businesses that promote public gatherings, those are the ones that we had previously closed, like restaurants and bars. They are to resume operations in a manner that allows for reasonable physical distancing, good hygiene, and appropriate sanitation, and to consider restricting occupancy and continue innovating in this uncertain environment. Personal responsibility is the key. The plan includes sections for schools and hospitals and daycares, and I'm not going to go over all of the various things, but you can find those online. And I'm sure in the coming days we will talk about them a little bit more. But personal responsibility is what it's all about, and we all want the best possible outcome for our community, and we need to support each other in our efforts to do so. And before I close here, I have a special announcement to make. Lou's Fireworks would like to invite the Watertown community out to the Anza soccer fields on May 2nd at 8 p.m. That's this coming Saturday. And there is a parking lot at the Anza soccer complex, and there's also a public parking lot across the street at the Premier Softball Complex. And people are invited to come, and you can park in the public right-of-way where parking is allowed, and in other locations as well. But they will be putting on a fireworks display. Their display will be operated in the fashion of a demonstration show for retailers analyzing products that they would like to add to their inventory. So, in other words, items displayed one at a time, but they'll be followed by a Lou's Fireworks surprise finale at the end. I don't know what that is. And it's an opportunity to get out of the house, but we'll ask that you please stay by your cars and in order to honor our recommendations about social distancing. We don't want people milling around, and you stay in your car if it's possible. If it's too hot, I guess you can stay right next to your car, but please don't wander around. This will be a dry run for us to see if we can manage this type of event, and maybe we'll do one here in the same location to celebrate Independence Day. So all of the folks at Lou's Fireworks say that they're very thankful that they live in such a wonderful community, and they want to say thank you to all of our community. So we want to say thank you to Lou's Fireworks for giving us this wonderful opportunity. So again, that's this coming Saturday, May 2nd at 8 o'clock p.m. And now I'd like to introduce City Council President Glenn Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor Karen. Part of what I'm going to say is going to be some repetition from what the mayor just said, but I would like to update you as far as what happened last night and do that effectively, give you a real brief history as to what has taken place the last roughly 5-6 weeks. When we had our first diagnosed case of COVID in Cottington County, the City Council convened an emergency meeting immediately and put some rather severe restrictions in place that effectively closed the doors of some businesses, definitely altered the way other businesses did their work, and that has been in effect now since March 26th, I believe, was the effective date of that. A week ago, we had at our regular council meeting, we took a look at that ordinance as we did every council meeting since the meeting back in March, and we decided to let that ordinance lapse as of last night, 11:59 p.m. But again, we were still thinking we might be looking at extending, revising, whatever the case may be, at our special meeting, which we held last night. Well, at our meeting last night, all 10 council members had a chance to speak to this after gathering a lot of feedback from throughout the community over the course of the previous weeks and especially the last few days. And we voted unanimously 10-0 to let the ordinance expire or sunset as of last night. Now, that obviously prompted a lot of questions immediately, because what we made it clear last night is that upon expiration of that ordinance, we would now be falling back on the governor's executive proclamation of 2020-12, which was proclaimed here a few weeks ago, which prescribes certain things that businesses would still be required to do upon commencing business. And as to be expected, a lot of questions came out from that conversation last night, and there have been a lot of phone calls to City Hall this morning and today as far as what that means. And as we speak now, or within just the last half hour, the governor has come out with some new guidelines for us to follow, which is going to change dramatically what we were just operating under last night. The new executive order, which Mayor Karen referenced, is Executive Order 2020-20, that then refers to something called her South Dakota Back to Normal Plan, which we found at covid.sd.gov. And as you go to that, Mayor Karen actually read the provisions that deal with employers as far as how they were to be operating, and as especially for those that have public gatherings such as bars and restaurants. But it definitely does loosen up what compared to what the previous executive proclamation did. So to summarize, the ordinance that we as a city council passed 5-6 weeks ago, that has now been sunset or has expired. And that has now been replaced by the new governor's executive proclamation, which is very loose, which, like Mayor Karen said, really relies upon personal responsibility of business owners and their customers to operate within those guidelines. But I would like to add that last night when we removed the city ordinance, we made it clear that we felt that if businesses, employees, people in general were abusing the way they were operating, that we still felt as a council under the terms of our home rule charter could step in and still implement some stronger provisions. In our opinion, I think it's still safe to say that we still have that possibility of doing that. We don't want to. I seriously doubt we will, knowing how responsible people in this community are. But we did make that clear last night that if need be, if we see an uptick in cases or, again, people acting responsibly, that we as a council feel like we may have an obligation to step in. But the governor's proclamation and her road to recovery, again, covid.sd.gov, you can find the document, lays out what she proclaimed today. So definitely a game changer for a lot of businesses in the community that were affected by our previous ordinance, but we are excited to be taking these steps to get things moving here in Watertown compared to the way they've been the last few weeks. So with that, I'd like to now introduce Casey DeBoer, who's President and CEO of Prairie Lakes Healthcare Systems.
Thanks, Glenn. Good afternoon, everybody. With the governor's announcement of her back to normal plan, which rescinds the April 6th executive order postponing all non-essential elective surgeries, Prairie Lake stands ready to return to providing elective surgery services and other healthcare services in conjunction with all of our physician partners as soon as possible. We have been planning for this day, and our plan starts with the safety of our patients and our staff as we resume providing these services. We have the bed capacity and PPE supply to feel comfortable to move forward as discussed in the governor's plan. Proactive measures implemented in response to COVID-19 will stay in place at the hospital as deliberate efforts to carefully return to business, including the continued enforcement of our no visitor policy and screening for signs and symptoms at the entrances. We appreciate your continued understanding and cooperation with these measures. We look forward to patients returning to Prairie Lakes to address the surgical and other healthcare needs that they and their provider have identified. Our staff looks forward to the opportunity to serve you again. Watertown area physicians are taking proactive steps to protect the most vulnerable community members. At the same time, you should not downplay any significant changes in your health condition. Always reach out to your provider if your condition changes. Now is a good time to have those conversations with your care team. Telehealth services and in-person appointments are available at all the clinics in Watertown. We will collaborate with our primary care partners, all surgeons, and of course our staff and the patients to make sure cases are scheduled timely and appropriately. If you have a procedure postponed, your provider team will be in contact with you to get the procedure rescheduled. On behalf of all of us at Prairie Lakes, we thank the community and the region for following the guidelines that have allowed us to flatten our curve of COVID-19 cases and prepare the community. Because of your efforts, we are now able to again provide the elective procedures that have been delayed. We welcome the opportunity to return, not to normal, but to a new normal as we make a positive difference in the health of our patients and the communities we serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Karen, Glenn, and Casey for speaking today. Are there any questions from the media?
This is Laura from the Public Opinion. I was wondering if any government offices will be reopening with this change in the city ordinance, or are they planning to remain closed for the time being?
Thank you for the question, Laura. The city buildings are closed because of our resolution, which is still in effect, and we will be talking about that on Monday night at the next council meeting on when to open back up. And I can't speak for the state offices, obviously, or any of the federal offices. Councilman Vilhauer wants to answer that as well.
Laura, just to add what the mayor just said, there's also been a lot of questions about what this means about park and recreation facilities around town. The Park and Rec Board is meeting this afternoon at 5:30, and that is one of the items on their agenda to see what course of action they may be taking along with their upcoming council meeting. So stay tuned for possible changes there as well.
Okay, thank you. And then I did have one other question about testing for coronavirus. Now that Governor Noem said there will be a few more tests, I think they're increasing from 3,000 to 5,000 in the state. Is there going to be a change in the criteria for people to get a test locally, or is that still the same kind of symptoms that they need to have in order to get one?
Thank you for the question. I listened to the governor's talk, and on several occasions she did mention that patients would still need to be symptomatic, or the Secretary of Health mentioned that they'd still have to have symptoms of COVID-19 to be able to get tested and have a physician's order. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Do you or anyone else have questions? Further questions? No? Now, we rarely do this, but I did see a question come in on the comment section from users, and I think it's very important to address. Someone asked, can we throw the masks away now? No. So you still need to keep up your social distancing and following CDC guidelines. Keep washing your hands, using hand sanitizer, and following those recommendations that come from the CDC. You can visit covid.sd.gov for those recommendations. We do encourage you to keep following those proper guidelines. Thank you for joining us today. If there are no other questions, you can join us tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Thank you and have a great evening.